Hi guys, Aubrey here. Today we're going to be doing a simple and tasty fruit leather recipe with our blackberries. We've actually sourced our blackberries from a local berry farm, so we're really fortunate to have some good, fresh, in-season berries. You can use any berry of your choice for this recipe, but we'll be using blackberries. Fruit leathers can be made in the oven or in a dehydrator. Our specific recipe today calls for an oven bake. It's a low, slow recipe, so we'll bake it upwards of 3 to 5 hours in the oven at 170 degrees. So like I said, very low. It's actually the minimal temperature that our oven would allow us to go. So that's what we'll be doing in the oven today, and you'll just need a few simple ingredients and equipment. We'll get your lemon juice from your fresh lemons, your berries. You can do a berry of choice. We are using blackberries. And then you'll need a juicer as well as a food processor and a spatula just to get the excess, just to get our excess stuff off after we're done processing it. So as I mentioned, just a few simple things. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's talk about the process a little bit. First thing you're going to want to do is rinse your berries thoroughly. Make sure they're good and rinsed before you dump them into your food processor. And if you don't have a food processor on hand, that's okay. You can use a potato masher or any type of utensil that gets the ingredients well blended together. So we'll get those berries rinsed, which I've done, and then you can dump that into your food processor. I've got 4 cups of blackberries in my processor. The recipe calls for 2 cups of blackberries, 1/4 a cup of granulated sugar, and the juice from a half a lemon. I went ahead and doubled that recipe so I can extend out a few other pans outside of this video. So I'm going to go ahead and get these blended up. Let me juice my lemons first. That's where the juicer's coming in hand. Over our blackberries. And then I have pre-measured here half a cup of white granulated sugar. As I mentioned, I doubled that recipe, so it only calls for a 1/4. This is going to be a half a cup. So once you have everything in place, we'll go ahead and get these guys blended up. Just until you notice that the consistency inside your food processor is pretty much almost like a liquid. We'll go ahead and liquefy that for the most part. I've left the seeds in as well. If you have a food mill, you're more than welcome to remove those seeds if either it's something that you don't care for the consistency of a fruit leather with seeds in it. That's perfectly fine too. We're going to leave them in there. I think they're good. So once we have it mixed up well, I'll go ahead and transfer that over to a pre-lined baking dish. You'll want to use a jelly roll dish, one that has at least a 1/2 inch lip around the edge of the pan. So when you pour your mixture into your pre-lined, we'll use parchment. I'm using parchment. You can also use a jelly mat. There's some type of silicone mats that you can buy for baking also. But you can use parchment paper or wax paper. Either one will do fine. We'll go ahead and pour a thin layer into this pan. And that's a really key important step in this recipe. You don't want it to be too thick because the processing time and the baking time may take a little bit longer than expected if we don't get a nice, consistent, thin layer. I'm talking less than a 1/4 of an inch, so somewhere around an 1/18 of an inch. You don't need to line your baking dish or your parchment paper or spray any oils on it. Naturally, your fruit leather should come off of your baking dish pretty well. I'll start with a thin strip just right in the center. You'll notice it was more like a liquid consistency when I poured it there. You can do a little shaking movement since you've lined your baking dish with parchment paper, and that will actually spread out your fruit leather. This actually works really well, just moving it around until you have that thin layer that we discussed before. If it's bumped up, just push it down on the edges so your mixture has somewhere to go. All right, that's looking really good. Really like how this turned out. And I also just love how simple the recipe is. So once you have your fruit leather mixture laid into your baking dish, we're going to transfer that into our preheated oven. We preheated the oven at 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and we'll want to bake these guys for about 4 to 5 hours. Now, we'll want to check about halfway through, 2 hours into your bake time, because each oven is a little bit different, and your baking times may vary depending on your oven model. So we're gonna go ahead and check it about 2 hours in and rotate our pan as well. Just kind of double check our consistency during cook times, and should be doing pretty good from there on out. Let's go ahead and get this into the oven. All right, folks, so we've allowed these fruit leathers to rest overnight. If you make this recipe early in the morning, you can just allow it to sit throughout the day and keep checking it for the consistency that we're looking for. Because after the cook time, they're still a little bit gooey and they don't actually pull away from the parchment paper like they should. So just allow them to sit and rest, and then you should end up with some nice leathery fruit rolls like we have here that you can just roll into strips, or you can just eat them like so for immediate consumption. So that's what I did with my first batch. We're gonna go ahead and gobble those up later. But I'd like to store these, and if you have a larger batch you'd like to store, you can remove them from the oven and from your baking dish, get them on a cutting board, get you a sharp knife or a pizza cutter. I've noticed that also works quite well. Parchment paper is very easy to penetrate, so you don't have to worry about applying too much force. Just go ahead and cut your fruit leathers into 4 strips, 5 strips, 6 strips, however thick or thin you'd like them. Cut them into strips on the parchment paper and then roll those up for future consumption. You can store these in an airtight container on your counter. You don't have to worry about refrigerating them per se. I would keep them out of the direct sunlight if possible though. This is what I have, so I'm going to be using my canning jars. Put that lid on there, and there you have it. Some really healthy, yummy snack choices for you. And I want to thank Mahler Farms again for allowing us to come out and harvest these beautiful blackberries. I hope that this recipe was easy to follow and turns out just as well as ours did. So thank you again and have a great day.